The following program is sponsored by CBN.
Coming up,
I would never hear that cry.
Heartbroken
I couldn't live with what I had done.
by her abortion,
I went home and I just wanted to die.
her 40 years of pain
I wasn't any good for anybody.
turned to laughter
Just let me hold her.
after a visit to the beyond.
And I immediately recognized her as my daughter.
On today's 700 Club. Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Fatah on Facebook, shut down, but not by the social media giant. The page glorified and encouraged terrorism against Israel.
The other outrage, Fatah is the political party of Mahmoud Abbas, who owned the page and its propaganda. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has the story.
Palestinian Media Watch sounded the alarm recently in a 40-page report called the Fatah Facebook Terror Promotion Partnership.
We're finding is that Fatah uses this as its main social media means to send out its violent and hateful messages.
Director Itamar Marcus laid out in detail how Fatah not only was encouraging terror on Facebook, it also praised specific events of violence.
Omar Abu Layla murdered 2 Israelis in March of this year, within days of his being tracked down and killed by Israeli soldiers. Fatah on Facebook was calling him the perfect person.
According to Marcus, Fatah's page boasted 250,000 followers.
So Fatah is sending out its message to its youth in Arabic that they see Omar Abu Layla as a role model, as someone who they're supposed to be copying.
In March, Facebook sent Marcus a form letter, a response he calls inadequate.
They sent us back this beautiful letter. You may find this distasteful or offensive, but it doesn't violate our standards, so why don't you stop following them?
Marcus took action by starting a social media campaign against the page.
Thousands of people have mailed emails to the heads of Facebook. There have been complaints of specific items demanding that they remove this site, which promotes terror.
Then CBN News and other news organizations began making inquiries to Facebook. On Wednesday, the Facebook page suddenly shut down, with Fatah all but admitting its page broke Facebook rules against encouraging terrorism when its editor told the Times of Israel, "We decided to close it down for a period of time as a precautionary measure. We were worried that Facebook would shut it down permanently because of that Israeli organization's campaign and complaints against it."
Literally, they're waiting for the campaign. They're so upset and so afraid of our campaign that they're closing it.
Also on Wednesday, Facebook responded to CBN News after the site was closed. We received reports about potentially violating content on this page, and as we do with all such reports, are in the process of reviewing that content to determine whether it violates our policies. We did not, however, take the action that unpublished this page.
Facebook should just close it down permanently once and for all. Facebook has to stop looking for excuses, if they are, for Fatah, and they just have to close this down.
While Marcus is pleased the page is closed, he realizes Fatah could reopen it at any time unless Facebook takes permanent action. Another major concern is Facebook's inadequate response and inaction, even though Fatah clearly broke the rules. It shows why governments around the world are moving to hold the social media giant more accountable. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, it shouldn't surprise viewers of this show to learn that the Palestinian Authority glorifies terrorism. This is an issue we've been publicizing and trying to really bring to bear to the American public. I mean, for a long time, our tax dollars actually went to pay terrorists, that they were rewarded with monthly stipends. Under the current administration, thank God, that's finally over. And we're finally taking a real hard look at who the peace partners are. Fatah they glorify terrorism. You go to Ramallah, you go to places in the West Bank, and they will have city squares dedicated to the heroes who went and did despicable acts. They've got a whole space for the refrigerator bomber. What did he do? Well, he loaded a refrigerator with explosives and then put it in the middle of Zion Square in Jerusalem and set it off. And that's supposedly a gloriful thing, something to be glorified. We need to recognize that there's not going to be any peace when your opponent wants to kill you. They come out and do this on a regular basis. They glorify it. They call them heroes and martyrs. They pay them money. And is it any wonder that they put that on Facebook? Now, Facebook's got a problem here. And this is one where if you're going to allow terror incitement on your social media platform, well, that's just going to invite more scrutiny and more criticism. And they better watch out. If they're not going to self-censor and say we can take a stand when you advocate killing Jews, well, then you're not going to be on our platform anymore. If they're not going to at least take that kind of stand, well, then they're going to get some governments coming in to say, well, we need to police you. Well, we've got some other news, and there's a whole lot of heat happening right now in Washington, D.C. Congressional Democrats say there's no longer any doubt about the need to move ahead with impeachment against President Trump. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
And meanwhile, Gordon, Republicans are raising concerns about the whistleblower's complaint against the president. And there are new questions about Vice President Joe Biden and his son and their dealings in Ukraine. Jennifer Wishon brings us the story.
Democrats are moving forward with efforts to impeach President Trump, accusing the White House of attempting to lock down details of his phone call with the president of Ukraine.
If there were any doubt about the need for an impeachment proceeding, there's none now.
But Republicans point out the complaint is only based on secondhand knowledge. When I think of whistleblower complaints, I generally think of someone with firsthand knowledge of the events in question, tweeted Senator Lindsey Graham. Testifying before Congress, the acting director of National Intelligence also emphasized the complaint was hearsay, not corroborated by other folks, something the president expresses in leaked audio.
Basically, that person never saw the report, never saw the call.
Meanwhile, the Ukraine issue again raises questions about Joe Biden's push to have a Ukrainian prosecutor fired when he was vice president. Biden insists he wanted Viktor Shokin gone because he was corrupt, not because he was investigating Burisma Holdings, a company employing his son Hunter. But a newly uncovered sworn affidavit tells another story.
Mr. Shokin swears under oath he was told he was fired because he refused to drop the Burisma investigation, and it made Mr. Biden, the vice president, unhappy.
So what do voters think about a push for impeachment?
I think it's more about politics at this point.
A new Quinnipiac poll shows a majority of Americans, 57%, do not want to see the president impeached and removed from office. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hurricane Durian is no longer in the news, yet the destruction it left behind remains. Operation Blessing is on the ground in some of the hardest hit areas of the Bahamas. Its disaster relief team is providing humanitarian aid in the form of clean water, food, medical help, and more. Here's Charlene Aaron.
Durian slammed into the Bahamas as a Category 5 hurricane, the worst in the country's history. Thousands of lives and homes have been destroyed, and the rebuilding process is likely to take years.
This footage, taken just this week over Freeport, shows the utter devastation in this part of the Bahamas, weeks after Durian hit.
20 minutes, it was 15 to 18 foot water up to the second story in plenty of the buildings, with babies getting washed away out of their mother's arms.
CBN's Operation Blessing remains on location in the hardest hit areas, including Abaco, Grand Bahamas, and Freeport, providing much-needed relief and support.
One of the biggest threats now is mold. So Operation Blessing is producing chlorine to help families sanitize their homes and neutralize the threat before it starts to affect their health.
We got water.
Medical help is also being offered.
What do you feel in your legs, right? Blood pressure?
Yes.
In partnership with local churches, food, hygiene kits, and Home Depot buckets, which contain cleaning supplies and masks, are being distributed across the islands.
The people here, many of them have lost everything. And to have Operation Blessing to come in with the Home Depot buckets, we're just so grateful.
Meanwhile, OB is helping to meet the spiritual needs of those who have lost so much. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
The long road to recovery. Gordon, back to you.
Well, we're there. If you're a donor to the 700 Club, you're there too. Without your gifts, we're not able to do the relief work that we do around the world. What's happened to the Bahamas is absolutely devastating. Our first trip there was like there's nothing even to put a tarp on. And so, you know, what do you do in that situation? Well, what you do is you roll up your sleeves and you say, what can we get to people, and how can we get kits to them? How can we get water to them? How can we get food to them? How can we let them know we're here, we care, we're not giving up on you? If you want to be a part of it, we actually have a designated fund where your gift will go 100% to disasters relief, whether it's in the Bahamas or right here in America, where we've got relief teams on the ground in North Carolina from the same storm in Durian. We've got another storm we're dealing with in Houston. Your gift will help us with disaster relief. So you can write to us, CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463, or you can call us right now, 1-800-700-7000. Terry?
Well, still ahead, a wounded woman is transported to heaven. What did she see? Who did she meet? And why is she finally laughing? But first, what will it take for President Trump to win again in 2020? Jordan Sekulow talks about the next red wave after this.
The deep political divide in our country is certainly discouraging, but don't give up on the candidates and issues that mean the most to you. One person really can make a world of difference. Take a look.
Jordan Sekulow has worked on 3 presidential campaigns and a host of political races at the state and local level. As a seasoned campaign organizer and advisor, he says if we want to see positive change on the issues that matter most, the Supreme Court, pro-life issues, Israel, and more, we have to commit to joining with other like-minded people and working toward electing candidates who share our beliefs and goals. His new book, The Next Red Wave, is a guidebook for conservatives on how to achieve victory from the grassroots to state legislatures, the halls of Congress, and beyond.
Well, Jordan Sekulow joins us now from Nashville, Tennessee. And Jordan, welcome back to the show. It's good to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Gordon.
What will you say to people who are frankly discouraged right now? It looks like the divide has gotten so wide between the parties. You know, it's a canyon, and all we can do is shout at each other. Why stay involved? Why would you want to get involved in this?
Sure. Well, that's why we wrote The Next Red Wave, because 2 of us, one of my co-authors and I, were on the president's legal team involving the Russia probe and his outside legal team and the Mueller investigation. And we realized that while that ended, Gordon, the deep state was not done at coming after President Trump. So this divide would continue, and to really do something about draining the swamp in Washington, D.C., like President Trump campaigned on, so we can continue to implement conservative principles and ideas, not just through executive action or through Supreme Court nominees that go through the Republican-controlled Senate as of today, but also legislation. The president has done everything he can using his executive power to do things like defund Planned Parenthood to the tune of $60 million. But to fully defund Planned Parenthood, it takes Congress, which means it takes the House. So part of, I think, bridging this gap is putting together what I think most Americans want, is not a party in charge that is more interested in trying to remove the president a year out from a presidential election where they have the chance to vote instead of legislating. And the book came out the day Gordon, the book came out the day Nancy Pelosi announced this next level, her big switch on impeachment. And again, part of our book is about how do you put this all together in defeating the deep state, because we saw that actor again. This was a CIA analyst who was positioned at the White House, who took information they overheard, and it was ultimately leaked to the media and has led to all of what we've seen this week so far. But the encouraging part is what role you can play, and that's what we really get at here is, though we're all lawyers, we have extensive political experience, and you'll like this, Gordon, both my two co-authors and myself, we all three went to law school at Regent University, School of Law, and so, again, we share the same like-minded principles as your viewers on the 700 Club, and again, we go through, we compare and contrast. How bad was it under the Obama administration? Don't forget how far we've come. Let's not lose that. And we use some biblical principles as well.
Well, let's leave the national stage for a moment. How important is it to participate in local state races?
You know, Virginia had a great example, and not to give away the entire book, but in the next red wave, we talk about how the House of Delegates there was decided on the shake of a random drawing of a name out of a can, which is typical actually of state legislatures across the country when there's a tie for the election and a tie for control of the state house. Well, it happened to be that the Republican's name was drawn. What did that lead to? It meant that very extreme abortion law, similar to New York, that Governor Northam in Virginia was willing to sign as being a very pro-abortion, backed by Planned Parenthood. We all remember his comments that he said about these late-term and even at-birth abortions. The reason why that was only an idea and didn't actually become legislation that landed on Ralph Northam's desk was because of the random drawing out of a can that gave the House of Delegates control to the Republicans, which means if one more person would have showed up to vote for that Republican, that wouldn't have been an idea, or vice versa. If one more person would have showed up for the Democrat, that legislation could have been on the desk of Ralph Northam, and Virginia could have a very different abortion law right now. So just one example of how one vote can make a difference at the not even just local level, but statewide level, how your local assembly race, or in some states it's state rep race, can determine the makeup of the entire state house of or your state assembly.
Let's take a look at the international stage as well. I don't think you've gotten the credit that you deserve for Andrew Brunson and his freedom. He's the American pastor who was imprisoned in Turkey. Tell us about that. How did people get involved, and how did they make a global impact, and how did they free that pastor?
So we talk about that in this book, that ultimately here, we compare it to two issues that we dealt with. One was an Iranian pastor, American, imprisoned in Iran under the Obama administration, and how we had to put together our largest petition ever, which was over 1 million people. We had to beg the administration to even pay attention. Really, ultimately, we had to shame the administration, the Obama administration, into getting Pastor Saeed released. And we know ultimately that was about the horrendous nuclear deal, which even Pastor Saeed opposed, and the billions of dollars the Obama administration handed over to the #1 state sponsor of terrorism, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, fast forward to Andrew Brunson, an American imprisoned in Turkey. You've got a strongman leader, but a NATO ally. Doesn't take us long. In fact, during the transition, he gets arrested right at the end of the Obama administration. They do nothing. They've already kind of checked out. So we already start working with the Trump team when they are in the transition period with Vice President Pence, President Trump, and then ultimately it would be Secretary Pompeo as well. But they were on it from literally before day one, before President Trump took the oath of office. This was one of his priorities. And he, instead of this giving things over to the Iran or trying to give things to Turkey. You know what he did to Erdogan? And again, we had thousands of people speaking up for Pastor Brunson, but it was a much more positive campaign because our president, our commander-in-chief, was leading the charge with us. So, I mean, it just encourages you, right? I mean, we don't want to lose that. We could quickly go back to those Obama years. And so what he did to Turkey, instead of bribing Turkey to get Pastor Brunson out, he tweeted, "I'm going to put sanctions on 2 of your top leaders." And Turkey said, no, you're not. And the world kind of said, no, you're not. And when Pastor Brunson wasn't released that day, the next day, there were sanctions on 2 of their leaders. And he wasn't released yet. But guess what? The Turkish economy started crashing. And then he said, okay, if you're not going to release him, I'm going to put sanctions on tariffs on your goods, on steel. And the Turkish government said, no, you're not. And the world economy said, too dangerous. So he tweeted that. And guess what? Pastor Brunson wasn't released. He put tariffs on the steel. Very soon after that, Pastor Brunson returns home to the United States of America. It is a very different approach to standing up for, one, those who are persecuted because of their faith, and Americans who are imprisoned illegally abroad.
Well, Jordan, thank you for that, and thanks to the American Center for Law and Justice. If you're interested in how you can get involved, the book is called The Next Red Wave. It's available wherever books are sold. Jordan, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much, Jordan.
Terry?
Well, coming up, what do Christians, Arabs, and Messianic Jews have in common? Worship leader Paul Wilbur has the answer. Hear him roar from Zion. That's later on today's 700 Club. But first, no tears in heaven? One woman asks, how is that possible? She finds out firsthand after this.
Well, many of our donors are leaving a legacy to CBN in their wills, and so many we're creating the Lasting Legacy Society. If you want more information of how you can participate and how you can leave a legacy to CBN, call us, 1-800-700-7000, or you can visit cbnlastinglegacy.com. When you call, we've got a booklet for you, adding a gift to CBN in your will or your estate plan. It's yours. All you have to do is call and we'll send it to you. 1-800-700-7000. Terry, over to you.
For years, Dell Anderson had a fear of going to heaven. She feared facing the child that she had aborted decades before. She was sure her daughter would ask her, "Why did you do that, Mommy?" But now, Dell doesn't have to worry about that anymore.
Wasn't that I wanted an abortion. I didn't. I felt like my baby would be better off not coming into this world. I wasn't any good for anybody. I was in my 2nd trimester when the doctor said, I can do this, but it won't be easy. You'll have to give birth. So I went to the hospital. I was in labor for 24 hours. The kind of pain that can only be stopped at hearing your baby's first cry. I would never hear that cry. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I went home and I just wanted to die. I couldn't live with what I had done. I sat on the edge of my bed and I had a razor blade, and I took that razor blade and I cut just the tiniest little slit, and I wanted to keep going, but my phone rang. I answered the phone, and it was a gentleman who had come to the church, and he said, "The Lord told me you were in trouble. The Lord says if you will walk the straight and narrow and trust in Him, He will restore what the locusts have eaten in your life and give you back tenfold what Satan has taken from you." God loved me so much that He had this man call me, and I promised the Lord that I would live for Him. God in His mercy saw fit to bring someone in my life, my husband, who's the kindest, gentlest man I've ever known. And as things began to strengthen in our relationship, I thought, I've got to end this now. It's not even fair to him. I told him everything about my life and how it had been. I'll never forget his words. He said, "It may have mattered at one point, but it's too late. I love you. And God has sent me into your life to undo those ugly things that have happened to you." We have to date been married 42 years. We have 2 daughters and 2 sons. It has been the most rewarding 42 years of my life. My husband, Kerry, is a gift from God. The Lord has given me all that I could have hoped for. I had happiness, but there was something lacking in my life. I realized that what I was missing was real joy. And I was missing that because I couldn't forgive myself for what I had done. I longed to see my daughter. I thought, how could there be no tears in heaven? When I get there, when she saw me, what would she say? "Why did you do that, Mommy?" And on the surface, I was happy, but I had no peace. I heard about a man who was holding a revival in Lakeland. His name was Pastor Rodney Howard Brown. So Kerry and I went. He was very willing because he knew the struggles that I had. And I sat through the whole service and nothing happened. So we got ready to leave and I was so disappointed. I was heartbroken. We were standing out in the foyer. All of a sudden, the Holy Spirit fell on me. And suddenly I fell down in the foyer and the Lord transported me to heaven. I looked up and I saw this red hue and it cleared up. I saw Christ sitting on a rock. He was sitting there in a white robe. He looked down at me and he had his hands on his tummy and he was laughing. And he would lean down like this and he would just throw his head back and just laugh with sheer delight. But then it began to clear up on the left. I saw this little girl with pigtails and a little white dress. And she was skipping and dancing and twirling around the feet of Jesus. And he was laughing and enjoying her. And all of a sudden, she turned and looked at me. Our eyes met, and I immediately recognized her as my daughter. And I reached, and I wanted to touch her. I kept saying, "Just let me touch her. Just let me hold her." And she skipped over to Jesus, and she tugged on his garment, and she looked down and pointed at me and said, "Look, Jesus, Mommy's laughing." And he said, "I know. Isn't that wonderful?" And then he turned and looked at me and he said, "From this day forward, no longer will you minister out of your pain, but you will minister out of your joy." And I knew that there truly would be no tears in heaven. My daughter held no animosity toward me at all. She was eager to see me. She was happy to see me joyous. It changed my life. Seeing her will forever be a memory that I will cherish. Because God, what he did is he replaced that memory of that tiny little baby. And he replaced it with seeing my beautiful daughter dancing around the feet of Jesus. What a wonderful God we serve, who forgives completely. At that moment, I was able to forgive myself in believing that my sin was too great, was literally watering down the blood of Jesus. because his blood was sufficient for all sin. No matter what we've done, his grace is sufficient.
As I'm watching Dell and she's telling her story, the scripture comes to mind. There is now, therefore, no condemnation. None. And you know, it doesn't matter where we've been or what we've done. That's what it says. There is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. We do water down what was done on the cross for you and for me. When we say we've done something that's too much for Jesus to forgive. That's why he said on the cross, it is finished. He covered it all. He covered it for you, covered it for me. Who loves like that, my friend? Nobody I know but Jesus. If he can give everything, if he can say it's finished and it's done, if his suffering and his bleeding and his dying were for you, then his resurrection was for you too. See, that sealed the deal. It wasn't just the dying, it was that he came back to say, I am alive and I am here and I know you, I see you in your mess, and I'm going to make a message out of your mess. Who else does that for us? You know, God is so patient with us. Patient in ways that we aren't with ourselves sometimes. You know, maybe your story today wasn't an abortion situation. Maybe it's something else and you haven't been able to forgive yourself. The message today is come home to the Father heart of God. There is forgiveness for everything with him. And then not just forgiveness, but a brand new beginning. And that new beginning means that you're not just happy and smiling on the outside. It means that he brings joy. Joy that lasts, that's planted in our souls, in our hearts, that allows us to truly rejoice, to truly worship, to truly appreciate and understand who he is and what he's done. He came to do for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. Wouldn't it be the most awful thing if we refuse to receive it? Today, will you receive the forgiveness of Jesus Christ and forgive yourself? Just right now, tell him, speak it out loud. Jesus, I receive that your death on the cross was for me, that your forgiveness of sin was for my sins, that your fresh beginning, your resurrection was also for me. And today, I don't just receive your forgiveness, I forgive myself. You know, there's nowhere else you're going to find that, but it's free. It's not cheap, but it's free. Receive it today. If you need to pray with someone, our phone lines are always open and our line is toll-free. It's 1-800-700-7000. If abortion is something you've gone through and you are suffering with the regret of it, we have a booklet we'd like to send you. It's called You're Not Alone. You're really not. You know, the enemy would like you to think you are, but you're not. This is free also. Ask for it when you call 1-800-700-7000. Gordon?
Well, coming up, she's 3 years old and she's already spreading the gospel. Meet Ellery and see why she loves to talk about Superbook. Plus, what does it sound like to hear God roar from Zion and thunder from Jerusalem? Well, that's what worship leader Paul Wilbur wanted to know. Hear what he found out right after this.
Welcome back to Washington for this CBN News break. The Trump administration is cutting the number of refugees it will allow into the United States to 18,000. The administration set aside 5,000 slots for religious minorities. Faith-based groups say that's not enough and will hurt Christians and others seeking asylum from persecution. Well, CBN's Operation Blessing helped a victim of Hurricane Durian on North Carolina's Ocracoke Island. Trudy Austin and her sister nearly drowned in their home. They had to break down the front door and swim across neck-high water. Their home was destroyed. Operation Blessing volunteers helped Trudy get back on her feet. She gave thanks for what she described as a team of angels that had just rolled in. With the support of its generous partners, Operation Blessing is able to help people like Trudy in times of crisis. Well, you can find out more about Operation Blessing by visiting ob.org. Gordon and Terry will be back with more of today's 700 Club right after this.
The Book of Joel. That's what inspired Paul Wilbur's latest album, and the result is nothing short of glorious. Take a look.
For 40 years, recording artist Paul Wilbur has traveled the world, sharing the message of the Messiah and acting as an advocate for Israel. While reading the Bible, Joel 3:16 captured Paul's imagination. He wondered what it might sound like to hear God roar from Zion and thunder from Jerusalem. From this, his next project was born. His latest 14-track album, Roar from Zion, was produced live from Jerusalem during Israel's 70th anniversary, declaring God's glory.
Please welcome back to the 700 Club our dear friend, Paul Wilbur. It's always such a treat to have you here.
Thank you, Terry.
It means we're going to get to hear you sing.
I hope so.
Worship, I should say.
This is an annual event.
Yeah, tell me about Roar from Zion. This was done live in Jerusalem, and 70th anniversary. It had to be a moment in time.
There were a lot of anniversaries that collided here. The 500th of the Reformation, the 50th of the reunification of the city of Jerusalem as the undivided eternal capital, the 20th anniversary of our release of Days of Elijah, and on and on and on. There was a whole bunch of them. But we gathered together on that platform. You saw just a few seconds of a clip. Actually, CBN produced the opening video for us. This is an amazing thing with Christian Arabs, Messianic Jews, Christian Zionists, most of them millennials from around the globe. It's now been released in Spanish. We're no longer with Integrity Music. It was number 3 on iTunes just because there's a sound, Terry. Yeah. And that's what I was getting out of the scriptures. The Lord said, in that starts in verse 14 in Joel 3, and there are, my mind is running so fast. I have so much I would love to say to you. There are multitudes in the valley of decision.
Wow.
And that speaks, of course, even of today, not just 3,000 years ago, where people's lives are hanging in the balance. And your last segment, a wonderful segment about the forgiveness and the power of the blood of Yeshua, the blood of Jesus. We were just worshiping 2 days ago in that garden. The tomb is empty.
Wow.
But we wanted to hear a sound. Because as I began to meditate on the Joel chapter 3, he says, I'm going to thunder from Jerusalem, I'll roar from Zion. What does that sound like? And I called our friend Gordon Robertson, and I said, is there something here, can we, help me? And so we've got just amazing partnership. We've been here at 700 Club since 1995, yearly. But that sound, as I found it in 1 Samuel chapter 7, that roar, that release of a sound from heaven of the Lion of Judah, it says there in 1 Samuel that when he released this sound, that the Philistines troubled Israel no more.
Wow.
So I wanted to capture something so that people, when they encounter Philistines in their lives, whether it's forgiveness, some kind of sin, or they're being attacked somewhere, that there is a sound released from heaven of the light. Oh gosh, there's just so much.
I know.
That Hebrew word.
It's different. I mean, your sound changed when you were looking for the roar. In what way? How did you express it differently?
Well, it's interesting, that Hebrew word roar, sha'ag, 5780 in your Strong's Concordance, has two meanings. It's a cry of despair, and it is a roar of victory. So the Lord said to me, when you cry to me in despair or shout to me, sha'ag, he said, I will roar over you in victory. When we cry out, help, he roars and thunders from Jerusalem and chases the Philistines far away. So we used Middle Eastern instruments. We were raising up the next generation. So we had Sarah Lieberman and Jamie Hillsden and Joshua Aaron, some of our young millennial up-and-comers that are releasing their sounds along with it. And
it happens. It happens. I want to mention that you're going to be here on Sunday night for Rosh Hashanah. We so look forward to your coming every year and leading us in that evening of worship and celebration. But I'm going to ask you to release and go over to where you're singing while I tell people more about your project.
All right, great.
It's so great to have you here. Well, I want to tell you, we mentioned earlier, Paul will be leading us in worship for our Rosh Hashanah celebration, and you are welcome to join us Sunday night. I'm telling you, it's a moment in time when we all gather. It's September 29th at the Shaw Chapel on the Regent University campus. It happens at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We'll be live streaming the celebration on cbn.com if you can't be here in person. Also want to remind you of Paul's latest CD and DVD, Roar from Zion. It's available nationwide.
Vicki loves spending time with her great-granddaughter, especially when they're watching CBN Superbook. Well, the 3-year-old has learned a lot about the Bible from Superbook, and Vicki is quick to admit that she has too, saying Superbook is not just for kids.
Meet Ellery. She's the pride and joy of her great-grandmother, Vicki. One of their favorite things to do together is watch the latest Superbook.
We are always challenged to try and find a new Superbook episode. That's our big thing, because she's fascinated. She wants more and more. It gives these kids a hunger.
One of their favorite episodes, the story of Jonah.
Jonah didn't go to Nineveh, and then him got swallowed by a fish, and it was a whale, and him was very bad.
Vicki loves that Superbook is teaching Ellery the stories of the Bible in a fun, new way.
And I make sure that she understands this is the Bible. These are real stories from the Bible, and they can learn the story exactly as the Bible tells it. And I think that's what the most profound thing is about Superbook. You brought Joy and Chris and Gizmo in, which brings it down to their level where they know it pertains to their own life. I want to make sure at the end what the lesson was learned, whether it's forgiveness or, you know, the Goliath is bad, David is good, he was brave. So you need to be brave, and she's learned a lot. And I've learned a lot. It's not just for kids.
Now, Ellery is taking what she's learned from Superbook and telling other children.
It's a wonderful thing. It's definitely what you want for your kids and your grandkids. It's the legacy you want to leave, because that's their foundation. And then when you build on that, and she's literally at 3 years old spreading the gospel.
That's David.
Yeah, by being able to share it, to share Superbook, then her friends learn, they can learn together. It's really a beautiful thing.
I love Superbook.
Children around the world are loving Superbook. We're now in over 50 languages, broadcasting these wonderful Bible stories so that children can hear the stories of the Bible. When Bible characters are talking in Superbook, they're talking the verses of the Bible. And it's a wonderful way to get kids educated on what's the plan of salvation? What do these stories mean? And how can these stories impact my life today? The wonderful thing, and it's the unexpected thing, is it's turning children as young as 3 into evangelists. They want their friends to know about it. So it's great what's happening around the world. Even better, you can be a part of it. How? By joining the Superbook Club. For a gift of $25 or more, we'll send you the latest episode, which is the story of the birth of Moses. And you'll get not just one copy, you'll get 3 copies. So you can share with your friends, your family, and help spread the good news about Superbook, about these wonderful stories, so children have an opportunity to learn the Bible. If you want to be a part of it, give us a call, 1-800-700-7000, or you can go to cbn.com. There's a place there where you can designate your gift into the Superbook Club. Either way, do it now, 1-800-700-7000. We got time for an email? All right.
Okay. This first one is from Jeanette Gordon, who says, I was just reading about the red heifer and the building of the temple. It is said that they found the perfect red heifer. Would you comment on this? And is this a sign of the end times?
Well, Jeanette, I was just speaking about this. We just had an all-staff chapel where I took on the topic of the red heifer. I'm not sure why, other than I think it was part of the weekly Torah readings that week, and so it was on my mind. It's called a statute forever, and even the rabbis don't understand why. Why do the ashes of a red heifer cleanse you from uncleanness if you've touched a dead body? Why do the priests serving in the temple need to be cleansed first by these ashes? And that's why it's significant for the end times. When red heifers reappear in the land, the rabbis are saying, well, it's time to rebuild the temple because we can purify the Levitical priests. So that's why it's so important. Don't have enough time to get into all the details, but here I've got something for you. And you can have this. It's free for you. All you have to do is call us, 1-800-700-7000. It's a special pamphlet put together on the power of Christ's sacrifice and based entirely on the passage regarding the red heifer. It's yours. If you want it free, you can download it right away. All you have to do is call us or we'll mail it out to you. 1-800-700-7000. We got time for one more.
Okay, this is Kim wants to know, is the Christian Standard Bible good to read as a new Christian? There are so many translations. She wants one that's accurate and sticks to God's Word.
The Christian Standard Bible is a good version. It used to be called the Holman Bible, and they've revised it yet again based on input after the release of the Holman. It's sort of brand new, and it strikes a balance between literal and contemporary translation. I always encourage, though, people, go back to the original language. You'll get a whole lot out of it. We leave you these words from Psalm 125. Those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be moved, but abides forever.